Samuel Joseph May was an exceptional gentleman who consistently and resolutely championed many 19th century reform movements. Applying the liberal Christian principles of Unitarianism, he was a dedicated abolitionist, temperance leader, pacifist, and advocate for universal education and women's rights. In 1846, with exemplary foresight and courage, he wrote one of the United States' earliest and most complete statements supporting women's suffrage.
Allow me again to speak plainly to you on the rights and condition of women. My thoughts were urgently drawn to this subject last spring by the fact that the people of this state were called on to decide whether the sale of intoxicating drinks should be licensed. A question of the highest personal, domestic, and social consequence, and yet more than half the people, the women, were not only not expected, but not allowed to influence directly a decision in which they were so much interested. Again, during this past summer, a large convention of delegates have been in session at the Capitol, framing a new constitution which is to affect as vitally the lives, liberties, properties, happiness of women as of men, and yet not a female was there to represent her sex. Nor is this all. But last Tuesday, when the constituents of that convention were called upon to signify whether they would ratify the new Constitution, the women of New York were not expected, nor would they have been permitted to say by their votes whether or not they were willing to live under such a frame of government. Now, this is all unequal, all unrighteous, this utter annihilation, politically considered, of more than one half the whole community. It is a piece of assumption just as egregious as it would be for the females to call a convention, frame a state of government, and go on to administer it by officers of their own choosing, without any recognition of the rights and hardly any of the existence even of our sex. This entire disenfranchisement of the females is as unjust as the disenfranchisement of the males would be. For there is nothing in their moral, mental, or physical nature that disqualifies them to understand correctly the true interests of the community or to act wisely in reference to them. Some of the ablest sovereigns who have ever worn crowns have been women. We have, therefore, evidences enough that the female mind is competent to discharge ably the duties incumbent upon a member of the body politic. As for myself, I am unable to see either justice or reason in the part of our civil constitution which denies women the right, if they see fit, to take part in public councils and influence by their votes, if they please, public elections. The Father of the human family, in his infinite wisdom, made man male and female, but he made us coordinate, equal in rank, alike rational, moral beings. God created woman to be the companion of man, not his slave, not his menial, not subservient to his will any further than his will is in accordance with the will of the divine mind. He has not given one law to men and another law to women, but the same law to both. The truest interests of each and the high purpose for which life was given to each are precisely the same. The doctrine that the people have the right to govern themselves is modern and almost peculiar to America. For if the people have the right to self-government, then I am unable to see why a half of the people have the right to govern the whole. To prove that woman was not intended to be the equal of man, the argument most frequently alleged is that she is the weaker vessel, inferior in stature and much less physical strength. This physiological fact, of course, cannot be denied, although the disparity in these respects is very much increased by neglect and mismanagement. But allowing women to generally have less bodily power, why should this consign them to mental, moral, or social dependence? Physical force is of special value only in a savage or barbarous community. It is the avowed intention and tendency of Christianity to give the ascendancy to man's moral nature and the promises of God, with whom all strength and wisdom are to the upright, the pure, the good, not to the strong, the valiant, or the crafty. But some would eagerly ask, should women be allowed to take part in the constructing and administering of our public institutions? Allowed? Why, pray tell me, is it from us that their rights have been received? Have we the authority to accord them just such prerogatives as we see fit and withhold the rest? No. Woman is not the creature, the dependent of man, but of God. We may, with no more propriety, assume to govern women than they might assume to govern us. And never will the nations of the earth be well governed until both sexes, as well as all parties, are fairly represented and have an influence, a voice, and if they wish, a hand in the enactment and administration of the laws. One would think that the sad mismanagement of the affairs of our own country should lead us men to doubt our own capacity for the task of governing a nation alone, and to apprehend whether we need other qualities in our public councils, qualities that may be found in the female portion of our race. If woman be the complement of man, we may surely venture the intimation that all our social transactions will be incomplete or otherwise imperfect unless they have been guided alike by the wisdom of each sex. The wise, virtuous, gentle mothers of our state or nation, should their influence be allowed, might contribute as much to the good order, the peace, the thrift of the body politic. Even for the restraint of the unruly and the reformation of the vicious, women would be found to possess a power and skill which far transcend the force and coarse appliances on which men are wont to rely. In support of this last supposition, I only need point to Mrs. Fry in England and to Mrs. Farnham and Miss Dix in our country. These women have evinced a fortitude and courage as well as a degree of sound sense which very few men possess.